Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope we're all well and thank you very much for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to show you how to fly a go-round in the Aerosoft CRJ. Other than the working title CJ4, this aircraft is the only other add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator currently that can fly go-rounds using the FMS data. So it is pretty interesting and exciting to get to grips with. Okay, so getting right into it. The procedure we are going to follow is laid out in a diagram in volume 2 of the documentation on page 11. This can be accessed within your installation directory for the CRJ. You can then go to data and then documentation and you'll see it in there, volume 2 quick reference guide. I'll also put a link to that document in the description if you don't yet own the CRJ and you want to follow along anyway. Alright, so let's have a quick look at that document now then. Okay, so here we have the diagram in the documentation, and I just want to run through this with you and make a few recommendations because this exact procedure doesn't necessarily translate perfectly into the simulator. So initially we are going to call go around and immediately press the TOGA switch. Now you should be flying manually at this point, however if for whatever reason you still have the autopilot engaged, you will need to make sure you press this twice in order to activate the go around mode. You'll need to press it the first time to deactivate the autopilot and then a second time to activate the go around mode. You'll know the go-around mode is active as you will see GA enunciated on the PFD. Obviously, if you're flying manually, a single press is all that's required. Now, you should be familiar with the TOGA switch, and you can access it one of 3 ways. So just in case you're not aware of all your options here, I'll just very quickly go through those. So you can bind it to a switch on your controller, which is what I would recommend. All you need to do is go into your controls and search for the key binding auto throttle to GA. I would recommend binding that to a button on your throttle quadrant. I have it bound to the auto throttle button on my TCA quadrant. You can also access the switch by using a hidden click spot within the cockpit. This is located on the left side of the autopilot panel and it is the top screw on there. And you just need to click that and it should activate the correct mode. And last but not least, you can actually use the switch that's located within the virtual cockpit, the actual switch, which is on the side of the thrust levers. But you do have to move your camera to access this switch, most likely, so I wouldn't really recommend using that. It would probably be a bit too much of a faff to do whilst you're trying to initiate a go-around. So one of the first 2 options is probably the best. We're then going to advance the thrust levers to the TOGA detent and start rotating the aircraft. Now, this note here could be a little bit misleading, because the flight directors will only start giving you a pitch up command once you've started retracting the flaps. And I suppose that's fine in a real scenario as you would be doing both of these simultaneously. However, for Microsoft Flight Simulator, I would not recommend trying to do these both at the same time. And the reason for that is that at this point you're most likely going to be at flaps 45. And you may well have noticed on approach that flaps 45 has a pretty drastic effect on the aircraft. You'll notice there's quite a ballooning effect when you bring out flaps 45 on approach, and you'll basically have the opposite effect when you bring flaps 45 in on the go-around. So you will notice once you start retracting the flaps, there'll be quite a heavy pitch down moment of the nose as flaps 45 comes in. So what I would recommend doing in this particular instance is I would start rotating the aircraft. I would just ignore the fact the flight directors are not pitching up currently. I would start rotating the aircraft to about 15 degrees And then once you've got a good rotation going, I would then start retracting the flaps. And what you'll notice then is the flight directors do start coming up to meet you at about 15 degrees. So from then on, it's pretty much just like a normal takeoff procedure. So it'd be positive rate gear up, and then you would want to activate speed mode. Now, I wouldn't worry too much about trying to activate speed mode at V2 plus 10 to 15, as I've found in a simulator environment, because we have to reach for the mouse to activate speed mode, it's usually quite difficult to achieve that. So I would basically just activate speed mode after you've put the gear up, and at that point you'll probably be somewhere around 160 to 180 knots, and that's fine. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Then we're going to call the lateral mode as required. So in the video you'll see I use heading mode. However, if you want to, you can use nav mode if you have the FMS1 nav source selected. In the video I am using lock 1 as the nav source, i.e. the green needles. So I'm going to use heading mode. But if you do have FMS1, like I say, you could go to nav mode here. However, it would probably be advisable to use heading mode in most scenarios. Generally, you will have to fly the runway heading for a couple of miles at least before you have to make any turns. So I would probably go with heading mode in most scenarios, and we'll activate nav mode a little bit later on. Then it's just a case of activating the autopilot. We'll probably be approaching around 1,000 feet AGL at this point, and we'll start bringing in the last two stages of flaps and starting acceleration to 200 to 250 knots. Now, the plane should be flying automatically at this point, so what you can do is, if you are flying with the green needles, like I will be doing in the video, you can look at switching your nav source at this point back to FMS1, and then we can change back to nav mode on the autopilot. Obviously, as well, at this point, you would move the thrust levers back to the climb detent. You would do this really around about the same time as starting your acceleration out to 250 knots. Okay, and that is essentially the procedure. What we're going to do is have a very quick look at the go-around procedure for the approach we'll be flying, and then we'll jump into the cockpit and show you how it looks in practice. Okay, so having a very quick look at the chart here, we are going to be flying the ILS 32 right into Cologne-Bonn. Now, I'm not going to cover the approach at all in this video. That's not what this video is about. We're just going to talk about the go-around procedure here. So the missed approach procedure noted at the top here is to climb straight ahead to 5,000 feet. When passing DME 3.2 at Cologne-Bonn VOR, or 2,000 feet, whichever is later, turn right to Kola VOR, which is down here. Now, I know from practicing this, we are going to pass through 2,000 feet earlier than reaching 3.2 DME Cologne-Bonn, so we are going to essentially be making that right turn at 3.2 miles Cologne-Bonn VOR. Now, just for demonstration purposes in this tutorial, I am going to use nav mode to initiate this right turn. However, you could probably use heading mode here. It's entirely up to you, but just to demonstrate how the FMS will sequence the missed approach procedure, I'm going to use nav mode here just to show you guys. However, what I am going to do, just to sort of cross-reference the turn and so that we can see where we are on the procedure, I am going to tune Cologne-Bonn VOR into the radios and use that in DME hold mode so that we can see when that turn is going to come up. Alright, so that's it. It's pretty straightforward, really. Let's jump into the cockpit and I'll show you how this all comes together. Okay then, so you guys join me on approach to runway 32 right at Cologne-Bonn. We are fully established here and just about configured for the landing. Just getting configured a little bit earlier than normal here, just for this tutorial. So let's just quickly review what we have going on in the cockpit here before we do the procedure. So we are currently established. Like I say, we've got our minimums set. What we'll want to do is, once we're established, is make sure that we set our go-around altitude to 5,000 feet in this case, as you may remember from the charts. We'll also want to center our heading bug and make sure that is basically set to runway heading. We can also just manually set this if we want to runway heading, which is 316 in this case. We are in lock 1 as the nav source, so we're using the green needles. You can use FMS1, i.e. the blue needles, for the approach. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but I'm just going to show you how to do it in this mode for this tutorial. We've also got a DME hold here, so you can see 5.4 miles counting down. That is the Cologne-Bonn VOR that we've got tuned here as DME hold. This is the ILS frequency here, and then I've got the Kohler VOR set in the recall. I also have that as the active frequency on nav2, and we've got that VOR needle showing. Not entirely essential, but we are just using that for situational awareness in this instance. So we are all set here. We're just going to descend on down a little bit further, and then we shall initiate the go-around. One other word of warning I just want to make as well is, if you had chosen an approach with vectors, you need to make sure you clear out the vectors leg on the legs page in order for the missed approach to sequence properly. So you would want to have done that before you actually started down on the ILS. Okay, so for the missed approach, what I'm going to do is I am going to just fly it, and I'll try and explain a few little bits that I'm doing here and there. But for the most part, I will probably just fly the approach, and then we will play it back and I'll review everything that we did. Okay, so we are approaching minimums. Let's say we've been told to go around by ATC. We'll hit the go around button twice, up to TOGA on the throttles. Rotating the aircraft, making sure we've got a good rotation, then bringing the flaps up to 8, positive rate gear up. As you can see, the flight director comes up to meters there. Making sure we're stable, then speed mode, heading mode on the autopilot, and then AP engage. Bringing the throttles back to the climb detent around 1,000 foot above ground level, and then we're going to start our acceleration out to 250. Bringing the last 2 stages of flaps up here as we start to accelerate. And then at this point, we are flying in heading mode, so this is not going to do anything just yet, but we're going to change our nav source to FMS1 here. You can see our DME information from the Cologne-Bonn VOR. We're at 2 miles out. We need to start that turn at 3.2. However, we're not going to do this in heading mode. We're going to switch to nav mode now, so I'm going to stick nav mode on. And at 3.2 DME, the aircraft should start making that turn itself. So here we go, 3.2. You can see the needles moving round. And there we go. It's sequenced to the next waypoint here. And it's going to start making that turn. You can also see here on the legs page that the missed approach sequence is now being flown by the flight computers. So just before going any further, let's just quickly review what happened there in the go-around. And I'll just fully explain what's going on. You can see what's going on as I left the camera view quite wide, so you can see what I'm doing and when. But let's just point out a few things here for you as we do the procedure. So first of all, you'll see I purposefully left the autopilot in for a bit longer here, just to show you how that works if you leave the autopilot in. In the CRJ, it is recommended to really just take out the autopilot by 600 feet above ground level. But as you can see here, when I initiate the go-around, initially by pressing the button on my throttle quadrant, the autopilot is disengaged, and then pressing it again will activate the go-around mode. You can see this enunciated on the PFD. Next thing to note is I do start making that rotation towards 15 degrees. And if you watch carefully as I do bring the flaps from 45 to 8, you will notice I have to fight with the stick a little bit to keep my angle up of the nose, which is why I recommend to start the rotation before you bring the flaps up. Alright, and once I re-engaged the autopilot and I was in heading mode, if you were already on FMS 1 here, you could quite easily just switch to nav mode straight away. However, because I was using the green needles, I made sure I was in heading mode first and then switched nav source and then back to nav mode. Alright, so I think everything else was explained well enough as I was doing it. So let's jump back and get our new approach sequenced into the FMS. So what I found here is, this is a very tight turn, so it is going to take it a little bit wider than perhaps what you would see on the chart. But essentially, it's going to fly the turn and then fly back in towards this blue line. So if you're not familiar with the missed approach and how it looks on the MFD, sorry, I just knocked the microphone there. It shows up as this blue line, and I had that visible for this tutorial so you guys could see it. And you can actually show that by going MFD menu and selecting missed approach here. So we'll just let it make its turn here, and then I'll show you how you can sequence your second approach. As you can see here, it's going to keep on turning until it starts to come back in towards the blue line here. If you're flying this on a network, you may not even go to nav mode, you may just fly vectors. But obviously the point of this tutorial is really just to show you how you can have it sequence the FMS data for the missed approach. Always keeping an eye on our speed here in CRJ. And as you can see, it should start banking to the left now to meet that line. And there we go. It's now going to start flying outbound towards the Cola VOR, which we can see there. And there we go. That is the missed approach procedure, more or less complete. Obviously, ATC would give you further instruction in real life. If you're flying on your own, however, you may want to just sequence another approach and fly that, well, as you wish, really. And basically, once you are now in the procedure and the legs have been sequenced, you can then go to the departure and arrivals page as you would normally set up an arrival, and basically just click on the approach that you want again. So we're going to go again for the ILS on 3-2 right. So essentially just tap on that like so. And in this instance, let's just select the transition of the Cola VOR. That's going to take us round in a perfect circle here. And we shall execute. And you can see then that is now drawn in. And we are good to go. Okay, so that, guys, is how you fly a go-around in the Aerosoft CRJ. Hope you guys have learnt something today, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Otherwise, let me know what you thought of the video by hitting the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. As always, hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.